Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and as we all know, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, on a fabulous Monday, or what I guess has become the norm for fabulous Mondays. I am Rob, casting you from the Robservatory, which is now properly, I believe, air-conditioned, and I'm quite enjoying it. Took me a while to get everything set up the way I wanted it, but I'm not sweating, like a rhinoceros. Do rhinoceroses sweat? I don't know if they do. Probably. I mean, they're from Africa. But anyway, they're big. Pachyderms? Are they pachyderms? I don't know. Or just elephants? I guess elephants are only pachyderms. Rhinoceroses are not. Rhinoceri? I'm not up on my wildlife. I better get up on that soon because there might not be any left at the rate we're going. But anyway, where are we? This is Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 266. And I had some things planned out, and I had stuff I wanted to read immediately. But right before I went on the show, that I was prepping the show at 12 o'clock today. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Look what happened to California. That's right. California coronavirus update. Governor Gavin Newsom closes all restaurants and movie theaters in the state. Now, I didn't know this was going to happen. I had already picked my topic for today that was about movie theaters. And then he goes and does this, which is certainly not unexpected based on everything that's going on. The day after California officials that the number of deaths in the state had passed 7,000, we're continuing to see hospitalizations rise, and we continue to see an increase in the rate of positivity in the state. We are moving back into a modification mode of our original stay-at-home order, says Newsom. The governor announced that he is requiring all counties to close their restaurants, movie theaters, wineries, zoos, and shuttering of all bars. Additionally, LA and 29 other counties on the state's monitoring list must close fitness centers, places of worship, hair salons, and indoor malls. This came after California Governor Gavin Newsom began his Thursday news conference, spoke about the state's efforts to mitigate wildfires, announcing the addition of 12 Black Hawk helicopters to the state's fleet as wildfire season begins to peak. He then transitioned to addressing a more immediate conflagration. Newsom announced a record number of daily deaths in the state from COVID-19, with 149 lives lost over the past 24 hours. That's up 23% from the previous high of 115 deaths. That grim mark was reported on April 22nd during the previous peak of the virus in California. The total number of lives lost in the state due to coronavirus is now 6,711. Now, I know, I sound like CNN, right? I don't want to sound like that, but this is all about movie theaters, and it's basically all about me. Let me talk about me for a minute. You know what I want? I want to see Tenet. I want to see Tenet. I want to see Tenet. I want to see No Time to Die. I want to see the Fast Saga, but mostly it's Tenet. I really want to see Tenet, No Time to Die. I knew this was going to happen. I just don't understand, science. I'm talking to you because of science, because of the great technology that we have, and we have good scientists that know what they're talking about. And now, I keep reading, people keep tweeting to me how the Dems are doing something that they created coronavirus to derail the election and destroy the economy. I'm just like, man, no, no, they didn't. Nobody wants the economy destroyed, and everybody wants to see Tenet, including me. I want to see Tenet, and I'm not going to. I thought I was going to be able to see it. Well, let's talk about when it was going to come out. It was going to come out 4 days from now. It was going to come out on Friday, this coming Friday, but then they pushed it into August. And you know what? It's not going to come out in August. It's not going to come out, and it's not going to come out because people are not smart. I wish we were. I wish we were smart. But if anything about, if nothing else, let's put more money into our education system because Americans, we're not doing very well. We're not proving ourselves worthy of living in adversity. And it's all screwing up my plans to see Tenet. I know I'm tongue-in-cheek about that, but I really wanted to see Tenet. And let me give you one more story. This dropped today at 9 o'clock on Deadline. We're not the only ones, people. Hong Kong Disneyland and movie theaters closing again due to COVID-19 surge. Date Hayes, Tom Grader, 8:53 this morning. Hong Kong Disneyland, which reopened June 18th, is closing again temporarily due to the resurgence of COVID-19. Hong Kong cinemas will also be forced to close again starting Wednesday after a spike in local cases of the coronavirus led authorities to re-implement tighter lockdown measures. The government will close 12 types of businesses, including gyms, gaming centers, and cinemas, and will limit group gatherings to just 4 people, down from 50. Cinemas initially shuttered on March 28th, but began reopening in early May with limitations in place. News of the theme park closure comes 2 days after Disney reopened Disney World, despite a significant rise in virus infection rates in Florida. The media giant has gradually been trying to reopen the gates of its parks around the world. The sites are a major source of revenue, but also present a nest of logistical challenges as health officials and political leaders grapple for solutions and infection rates fluctuate. As required by the government and health authorities in line with prevention efforts taking place across Hong Kong Disneyland Park will temporarily close from July 15th, a Disney spokesperson said in a statement. The Hong Kong Disneyland Resort hotels will remain open with adjusted levels of service. They've put in place enhanced health and safety measures that reflect the guidance of health and government authorities, such as social distancing measures and increased cleaning and sanitation. Hong Kong began confronting the coronavirus starting in January, with schools and businesses closing. During a second wave... Wow. That's not good. I don't know if you can hear this, but Skyfall just... Is this playing? Hang on, wait. Can I see it? Oh, maybe you can't see it. Suddenly, just Adele just started playing in my headphones, which I like Skyfall, but I need to turn that off. I find that interesting, though. But it did happen. Let me turn that off for a second. This is the end. It is the end, isn't it? Maybe that's the lesson I was supposed to take from this. Hong Kong began blah, blah, blah. Hong Kong Disneyland opened in 2005. It brought in $6 billion in revenue during the fiscal year ending September 28th, 2019, but losses doubled to $13.4 million from the previous year due to ongoing anti-government protests. Unless we have an effective vaccine which can be widely used in the community, we may need to coexist with this virus for a period of time. Keep in mind, there is currently no vaccine for any coronavirus. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam told a news conference on Monday, as reported by Reuters. The theater news is a blow to the local film industry. Hong Kong has had relative success containing the virus thanks to strict early lockdown measures, but the territory confirmed 52 new cases today, taking its number to 1,522 with 8 deaths. On a more positive note, the government's Film Development Fund today announced plans for a $260 million, or that's Hong Kong, or a $34 million US dollars shot in the arm for the local film biz, with money going towards several supporting measures, including one that will see established directors such as Wong Kar-wai, one of my favorites, partner with young filmmakers to make films with subsided budgets. As a result of events, social events, and the epidemic, local film production and investment have shrunk, posing acute challenges to the trade and practitioners in the past year. The government is therefore committed to providing multi-pronged support for the trade to go through this difficult period and sustaining the success story of Hong Kong films. But here's what I'm getting to my topic of today. And let's just jump into this, right? George Zalai. This was published in the Hollywood Reporter this morning at 5:30. Analyst cuts 2020 box office estimates, says cinemas will reopen in September at the earliest. MKM Partners' Eric Handler now expects a near 70% decline compared to our prior view for a 55% to 60% decrease for the year. U.S. cinemas are likely to reopen in September at the earliest, given latest infection data for the novel coronavirus pandemic, MKM Partners analyst Eric Handler said in a Monday report in which he reduced his 2020 box office estimate. The near-term outlook for exhibition-related stocks remains extremely clouded given the uncertainty about when theaters will be able to reopen with new Hollywood content, he wrote. We place a low likelihood of Tenet opening on August 12th, given a rising number of COVID-19 cases in key areas such as California, Texas, and Florida, along with the slowed reopening of the New York City economy. In our view, it would be surprising to see theaters able to reopen nationwide before September at the earliest. Handler reduced his 2020 box office forecast to a near 70% decline compared to our prior view for a 55% to 60% decrease, saying, "For the back half of the year, we project third quarter and fourth quarter box office revenue could fall 90 and 50% respectively, down from our previous forecast calling for a decline of 65% and 29%. Internationally, the analyst said that while Europe appears to be in a better position than the U.S. regarding the pandemic, we doubt the region will have any meaningful new content to show at reopened theaters until North America is back online. As a result, he sees Europe's box office results mirroring the domestic performance. Latin America, with its high and fast rising level of COVID-19 cases, seems to be further behind an eventual North American reopening," he added. "As of right now, we would be surprised if the region reopens at all in the third quarter." And China remains a big question mark as the government has been reluctant to make any comments about the resumption of business for the exhibition industry, Handler wrote. "Beyond this year, we do believe there is a pent-up demand for consumers to get out of their houses for entertainment, although the ramp-up in attendance will likely be gradual," he concluded. "We project domestic box office revenue of $9.1 billion, or 158% in 2021, and a back-to-normal level of $11.5 billion in 2022. What does all this mean for investors in exhibition stocks?" Handler said. "Their focus should return to liquidity until there is a broad reopening." And he reiterated, "We continue to believe IMAX and Cinemark are best positioned to navigate through current business issues given their well-funded balance sheets." AMC Theaters on Friday improved its balance sheet with news of a debt restructuring combined with $300 million in new capital. Although AMC now has some breathing room, it remains highly levered and still pays a significant amount of interest expense, while its free cash flow generation ability continues to be questionable. Well, I mean, it's very frustrating for me personally. It's been very frustrating to have been sheltering at home and wearing a mask, and Elizabeth has been very diligent making sure every time we go out of the house, we wash our hands when we come home. And she's good like that. And to see our state that was doing quite well suddenly explode with COVID cases everywhere. Why do you think that is? I mean, quite simply, people are not paying attention. It's because of us. It's not because there's more testing. Yes, there's more testing because there needed to be. And now you have to know where the virus is before you can tamp it down. So that is true. But unfortunately, we're to blame. Remember, it's always our fault. It's always our fault. I mean, it's never, well, unless I guess a volcano erupts, maybe it's not our fault. But for the most part, it's pretty much our fault. And it's monumentally frustrating to know that we're going to be locked down, locked away, especially in this country, for who knows how long. I mean, I can't believe that on my feeds and everything, it's turned into some kind of a weird political issue. Like, everybody gets the flu every winter and no one talks about it being political, or that it was a Dems plot to derail the election. No, in the winter, people get colds and flus and they pass it to one another. That's how it works that way. That's how we're built. And it's just frustrating to see this happening. And I don't really see that we're going to be out of this anytime in the near future, because I understand everybody wants the economy to open. People have to work. People have to eat. I understand that. I totally get it. I know where everyone's coming from. I do. But the fact is, are we just going to make it par for the course? Is it just going to be, we're just going to live with this now when we really don't have to? It's just people have to take precautions, and they don't. Watching people argue in Costco, of all places, or in Walmart about wearing masks, I just don't get it. I mean, how hard is it? How long are you in there for? Half an hour maybe? You shop for half an hour and you can't wear a mask for half an hour while you're around people? I don't understand. I really don't. So all of this really means that I am not going to be able to see Tenet when I wanted to. And really, I've just decided that I should start just looking at my life that way. Instead of worrying about like the country at large, I'm just going to start thinking about myself because damn it. Although there is an excuse that I have now to like, obviously there's a Warner Archive sale on, there's a Criterion sale at Barnes & Noble, and Arrow is also having a sale. I've hit 2 of those, picked up some stuff. Because what else is there to do? And there's not going to be any physical media to buy in like 3 or 4 months. Everything's going to be running out. You got to go get those catalog titles now, right? It's very depressing. I'm kind of bummed out. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to shelter at home. You're going to wear a mask. That's all you can do. And enjoy movies that you have never seen before on streaming. So, speaking of that, Jeffrey Mao is here. The chairman himself has written another letter. July 13th, he wrote this. Hi, Rob. I recently ordered Grindhouse Releasing's recent release on Blu-ray of the 1968 film The Swimmer, starring Burt Lancaster. I own that. It's an amazing-looking 4K restoration, and it's a film that I, and probably a lot of people, had never heard of before. I was hoping to write in with a full review, but I've only watched about half. But I thought that it would be interesting just to discuss the existence of this version of the film as it relates to the current state of the enthusiast cult niche home video market, as I think it's almost as fascinating to consider that as the film itself. So to discuss the film briefly, it's really a character piece about a man named Ned Merrill, played by Burt Lancaster. He's apparently a businessman of some kind who lives in an affluent upper-class suburb of New York City, probably in the Hudson Valley area. He spends what appears to be the entire film in swimming trunks and decides that he will swim back home from a neighbor's house. They are all rich, so they all have swimming pools, and he imagines that the pools link up to make a river, which he names after his wife. Along the way, he meets and greets the different neighbors, and you get the sense that something quite strange is going on. Why is Ned in swimming trunks at the start of the film, away from home? He just shows up at a house having apparently jogged through the woods. Everyone seems to know each other, but it appears that some time has passed. He's surprised at how much a girl that he used to hire as a babysitter has grown. Different friends and neighbors express surprise seeing him, and they have not been able to reach him. He says that he'll call them, or they should call him at the office, or they'll have lunch with him, but it always seems like he's just blowing them off. There's clearly something wrong going, as certain things that are said to him seem to unnerve him. He always says that his wife and daughters are at home, but why is he wandering around in swimming trunks? He also seems to take an almost childlike delight in chasing a horse or running around an equestrian training ring with the babysitter who has joined him on his adventure. However, the situation soon turns dark as the babysitter admits to having a crush on Ned, and he responds in a rather creepy manner to her. The feel of the film is quite surreal, at times almost dreamlike, with the typical late 60s use of the slowly coming into focus and out of focus shots, and Marvin Hamlish's intriguing score. Marvin Hamlish also wrote the score for The Spy Who Loved Me. I deliberately didn't read much about the film, just the basics, and it appears that the film has a bit of a cult following, but small enough that even I have never heard of it. The late Stuart Gordon wrote an entry in the liner notes that I will go back and read once I finish the film. I can tell how good of a performance by Lancaster this was, in addition to the challenge of doing the entire film in the same pair of swimming trunks. I can imagine this film might have been popular at colleges, as the film seems to skewer subtly, of course, the rather boozy, blasé, and superficial nature of elitist upper-class society. This would be exactly the thing that would appeal to the counterculture generation. So I'll definitely follow up with a full review, as I'm really interested to see what the twist is, because it seems like we're heading toward a good one. I wanted to finish up this letter discussing how the Blu-ray release is kind of indicative of the current state of the independent or niche or enthusiast or collector's video market. Grindhouse Releasing is, by the very name alone, an independent distributor of mainly horror and exploitation films. Think Cannibal Holocaust, Cannibal Ferox, I Drink Your Blood. Yet they do a film like The Swimmer, a character-driven film that fits the cult status, but is completely different in look, mood, and feel from anything else they've done. So clearly this must have been a passion project for them. In a completely different vein, but yet similar as well, I got Hot Dog the Movie from Amazon recently, as I remember that this came from Don May and Synapse. It's also a 4K restoration and looks great. And it's the unrated producer's cut scanned from a recently discovered camera negative. But it points to the randomness of the market at this end, where you'll find a negative and then it's put out. So imagine if the negative was never found. Who knows what's lying around out there, and The flip side is that it's a shame that many negatives of films were probably destroyed or just left to rot. Can you imagine doing a 4K restoration of an old 70s or 80s porn film, for example? Actually, they have, and I have a few. Barbara Broadcast by the great, Radley Metzger, who then became Henry Paris. And it looks fantastic. I love Barbara Broadcast. 70s porn is the best porn. I mean, think of how good that could look. Insert sound of spring. I would think that there would have to be some good negatives or prints out there of some films. It's just a matter of someone wanting to do or go through the process. I suppose the closest thing now is what Vinegar Syndrome is doing. A lot of 2K scans and restorations and selling limited runs of 2,000 or 3,000 or so. But I also see these shops like Synapse, Grindhouse, and Vinegar not wanting to stick only rougher content, but delving into more mainstream fare with wider appeal. Look at Vinegar doing a limited run of a 4K version of Rad, for example. It's a toe in the water to see if they can dredge up other forgotten, underappreciated, and cult-type films that aren't too trashy and possibly go for a bigger run. So, I guess it's a matter of just getting whatever we can at this end of the market with no expectation that everything else will see the light of day with a nice release. Well, Rob, I'll chime in soon after I finish watching The Swimmer. Well, Jeffrey, I wonder what you are going to think of the movie. The Swimmer is a very interesting film, and I'm not going to get into it. That's a movie I should show Elizabeth. We should do for Elizaviews, whining about movies, because that would be fun. You know, I think you bring up a good point. I mean, every time I talk about the end of physical media, there's always somebody that chimes in, without exception, about vinyl. And how, vinyl's come back, and vinyl sales surpassed CDs. Well, that is true. But the cost of creating a record is far cheaper than making a film transfer. Look, I want to do a 4K version of Free Enterprise and do my definitive version of it. I've talked a lot about doing that. And you're looking, to do what I want to do, you're looking at over $100,000. That's just the cost of it. Now, if you could sell that version to streaming and then also make some money back on physical media, and everyone's like, well, Rob, you should crowdfund it. Well, I can't crowdfund it because I don't own the actual negative. If I could buy the negative, then I could go back and crowdfund it, and I would do just that. But it's hard. You know, when you're dealing with film elements, it's expensive. And sometimes if you have an ongoing deal with somebody, I mean, I think Don May does a terrific job. I love what Synapse is doing. I love what Vinegar Syndrome is doing. Vinegar Syndrome put out an unbelievable copy of Liquid Sky, which I thought the negative for Liquid Sky was gone forever. And luckily it was not. And Vinegar Syndrome, they did a phenomenal job. They also did a phenomenal job releasing our Australian favorite, Body Melt. And I think that's what is making a lot of... Look, for me, for anybody who's collecting physical media, that's why a movie like The Swimmer, who knows when that's going to show up on a streaming service. And, you know, I've talked a lot about how pop culture has a shelf life. And eventually, I mean, there's always going to be people who are delving into the past and looking into things that they haven't seen yet. But for the most part, it decreases exponentially as the years go by because, you know, the films that were big in the 60s, like I'm a big Antonioni fan. And his Ennui trilogy is a particular favorite of mine. La Notte, La Ventura, and The Eclipse. L'Eclipse. Those movies, does anybody watch them? I mean, I know Criterion's put them out. But it's, unless you're somebody who's actually delving into those things, every year that passes by, there are movies that are lost to time. And unfortunately, there isn't a large... even the studios. The studios are licensing out. I mean, look at Disney's. They own the Hollywood Pictures, things like Down and Out and Beverly Hills. They're licensing out their movies to Kino. They're not even putting them out under their own banner anymore. They don't care about them. They've basically given up. And, you know, you would think that maybe they'll wind up on Hulu or something, but it's not their bread and butter business. So if you look at catalog titles, unfortunately, I mean, it's the same thing was true of soundtracks. You know, soundtracks would sell, Lucas Kendall would tell me they used to manufacture 3,000 soundtracks because they knew that there were 3,000 people in the world that would buy soundtrack albums. That number has diminished. I've heard it now, maybe it's only 1,000. So companies like La La Land Records, can they sustain themselves? I mean, most of the things are already out, but there's a lot that aren't. And for archival purposes, I mean, I've always thought that these kinds of things somebody should be out there doing something to preserve our heritage, our artistic heritage. But especially in this country, there's no will to do that. I mean, it's interesting to me that Criterion just put out War of the Worlds, for instance. And I have my copy that I got from Australia right over here, which just came out from Imprint, which is great. And Imprint also just put out When Worlds Collide, which reminds me I need to order that. Now, why didn't Paramount, that owns these movies, why didn't Paramount do like a George Pal box set and put out Conquest of Space, When Worlds Collide, and War of the Worlds? Maybe Destination Moon. I don't know if Destination Moon's Paramount. But the reason they don't do something like that, and the reason they release their 4K restoration of War of the Worlds only on iTunes, is because they look at the numbers and they can't justify it. How many people in the world are going to buy War of the Worlds? People like me. You know, no one's eager. I mean, the transfer is stunning. And it's frustrating to know that our cinema, our deep, rich history, our cinematic legacy is being chipped away at because it's not popular. And as every year goes by and new generations begin to grow up, it's not like you're going to meet a lot of 20-year-olds, even 20-year-olds in film school, that are going to be clamoring to get those Criterion discs of Antonioni's Ennui trilogy. And it's a bummer. But look, I think the niche market is terrific, because the one thing is about the niche market, the reason it's surviving is because most people are going to Arrow or Scream and Shout or Criterion or Mill Creek or Synapse or Vinegar Syndrome or Indicator, Arrow, all of these things, that for the physical media collector is drawn towards niche market material anyway. So as long as we're still buying stuff, it'll keep going. But I've even heard, Scream Factory, Shout Factory, they're looking at, they don't know if their physical media business is long for the world. By the way, for those of you who don't know, the film I produced, The Hills Run Red, is currently available from Scream Factory right now on Blu-ray. Came out a couple weeks ago for the first time ever on Blu-ray, with 6.5 hours of new bonus features, joining the already 2 hours of bonus features that were on the disc to begin with. I know I haven't plugged it in a while, but if you like slasher movies and meta horror, hey, you do worse than watch this film. It looks great, and I'm proud to have that movie come out from a niche label. It's nice to have product on the shelves. So that's pretty cool. Joey Coke is here. Joey Coke says, "Hi, Rob. The other day you teased listeners with a brief reading of the first couple of pages of your Free Enterprise 2 script. And shit, I've forgotten the actual title. It's actually Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner. But I have a few questions for you about it, which I hope in my ignorance doesn't break any Hollywood etiquettes. Is it okay to ask you about the synopsis, returning characters, or who you would like to cast? And does the current draft vary much from the version you had prior to the aborted shoot? Also, any chance you had a teenage crush on Deborah Van Valkenburg? I did. How did you end up casting her?" Well, Joey, those are all good questions, and I'm happy to answer them. It's kind of an interesting question, actually. So, at the time we were going to make Free Enterprise 2, we were going to have an all-new cast of characters except for William Shatner and Dan Schweiger. And because they were real people. And everyone else we had recast. And I'm not going to talk about the movie was fully cast. I mean, I will say that we had cast people like Pam Grier was in it as Shatner's love interest. Malcolm McDowell was going to be in it. These were people that we cast. I don't want to talk about, other people, but the premise was that in the movie Free Enterprise, The Wrath of Shatner, Free Enterprise, the first Free Enterprise, was the movie that the characters in the new movie made. So it was very meta. So at the end, we hope to bring back like Eric McCormack and Rafer Weigel and Audie England to play themselves in a wedding scene. So it was going to, the level of meta-ness in the film was off the charts. So, but so what you would have is you would have a new Rob and a new Mark character played by other actors, and then you would meet Rafer as the actor who played Rob in the first movie. Very crazy. By the way, I would not do that now. if I was ever able to make the sequel, I probably would try and get back the original cast. That's what I would do. But the plot of the movie is this. So William Shatner was opening on Broadway in a version of Fiddler on the Moon, and directed by Bryan Singer. And it ends up, after rehearsals, they fire Shatner, and he's replaced by Patrick Stewart, who he wanted to get into the film. And Patrick Stewart takes over, and Shatner is sort of in a funk, and he realizes that at this point in his life, what he's missing is spirituality. He's facing mortality, and the Rob character is getting married to a woman, not his love interest from the first film. The Rob character is getting married and took it upon himself to enter Shatner in a rabbinical correspondence course in Las Vegas. So Rob has been taking the course for Shatner, and Shatner is now a rabbi. So Rob presents this because Rob wants Shatner to marry them. And Shatner says this is amazing, this is what he's been missing in his life, but he doesn't want to be a fake rabbi, so he has to do a great mitzvah for the world. And he disappears. Nobody knows where he's gone. And it begins an odyssey where Mark and Rob have to go figure out where Shatner is gone. What is it he's up to? And it's a globe-trotting adventure that takes us to Las Vegas. It takes us to New York. It takes us to Russia. It takes us to Spain. It takes us to Israel. And there's a ticking clock element to it. And we find out that Shatner, he has a deep past with Patrick Stewart that goes all the way back to the 70s when they were intelligence operatives. They were recruited by MI6 and the CIA, respectively, because there was a CIA program in the movie. There's a CIA program in the 70s where they recruited actors or up-and-coming actors in the hope that they could put them in places where actors would be invited where other actors couldn't go. So you find out that William Shatner and Patrick Stewart have a past, and Patrick Stewart and William Shatner hate each other because a mission that they were on in the 70s went horribly awry, and Shatner made a bad call. And that's why Patrick Stewart wanted to be the new captain of the Enterprise on Star Trek The Next Generation, and why he's always lording it over Shatner that it ran 7 years instead of 3 years like the original series did, because they have a past. And their intelligence operative past and their animosity toward one another plays into where Shatner has disappeared and where Shatner has gone and what he's trying to do, how he's going to do a great mitzvah for the world. And I'll just leave it there. But that's the basic gist of it. But basically it's a combination of Free Enterprise, Doctor Strangelove, and The Search for Spock. If that makes any sense at all. And I really love the script, if I do say so myself. And it was very funny because Mark and I talked a long time about a Free Enterprise sequel. And it was a time, I don't remember if I was working on the Star Trek V special features where I was actually in Shatner's office recording his commentary and interviewing him. But we'd asked him, we said, if we ever did, because Shatner sort of became the character of Bill in real life, recording that album with Ben Folds and then getting onto The Practice and Boston Legal. He won 2 Emmy Awards, and he sort of really became the character that we had written of him. The version of Bill in Free Enterprise became the real Bill. So we had said to Shatner, we're like, look, man, if we ever made a sequel to this movie, what would the character of William Shatner be? What would the character as William Shatner, the character of Bill that Shatner portrayed in Free Enterprise, what would he be? Where do you see that going? And Shatner's answer was, I think the character of Bill should be a rabbi. I think he should be a rabbi. And we were like, and it took us a really long time. We were grappling with that for a long time. We didn't know, well, how do you make that work in a comedy? If William Shatner is going to become a rabbi, he can't like have tzitzis, and you can't make him. It would have to be larger than life. And then Mark and I actually came up with the idea. We realized it was when his son Isaac was very young, and he was a baby. We would go to this Mexican restaurant and have lunch on Sundays, and we had a we were having lunch and we were with Isaac, and we were like mulling over it. It was like lightning struck us both at the same time. We both had the exact same idea, exactly the same time, as we had lunch with Isaac, about what would, as a rabbi, what would the great mitzvah, what would be the thing that William Shatner would want to do as a rabbi. And we both came up with the idea like at the same time. And once we had that idea, the script practically wrote itself. And now you would meet all the characters from the original film. Now, if I made it, we'd take the same script, but I would just try and get back as much of the original cast as possible, which could be a lot of fun. And we were 2 days away from principal photography when we lost our funding, and it was a bummer. I did have a teenage crush on Deborah Van Valkenburg because she was in The Warriors, and I had seen The Warriors 100 times, and she was Mercy in The Warriors, and she's the girl that Swan meets as the Warriors are trying to get back to Coney Island, and I did have a crush on her. She wasn't my usual type, but I loved... it's not actresses that I develop crushes on, it's the characters they play in movies. So, like, I was never somebody that would put actresses' pictures up on my wall. I did not have that Farrah Fawcett Majors poster, that famous poster on my wall. I never did that growing up. I had a Logan's Run movie poster on my wall. Like, that's how it would work for me. So it's like Grace Kelly. I love Grace Kelly, but I love Grace Kelly specifically in Rear Window. Just like I have a horrible crush on Michelle Pfeiffer's character, Joanne Volinari, from Tequila Sunrise from '88, the movie with Kurt Russell and Mel Gibson. So I didn't have a crush on her, but I love that character in The Warriors, if that makes any sense. So, and how I ended up casting her was Mark and I were given a list. Our casting director, Linda Francis, who's unfortunately has passed away, she also cast Swingers. She gave us this list. Shatner, he goes, Shatner said, for my love interest, can you get that gap-toothed model? And we're like, you mean Lauren Hutton? He goes, yeah, get Lauren Hutton. Well, we didn't, she wasn't on the list, but so when I was given a list by our casting director of like 10 potential actresses that we were going after, Deborah Van Valkenburg was on the bottom of the list. And with Mark, I'm like, oh my God, it's got to be Deborah Van Valkenburg, because because if I can get an actor who's in a movie that I particularly love, for me, I love that. I love that actor it's just like we have other references to other movies. If you can get actors like that to be in your film, like I have to tell you, I have watched the movie The Stuntman like 100 times. I love the movie The Stuntman. And I love Steve Railsback in The Stuntman. And I didn't cast him, but I got to direct a sequel to an episode of Femme Fatales that Steve Railsback was in. And I was beside myself just working with him. And he was great. Of course, Life Force and Helter Skelter and all that. But I was, and Escape 2000 with Olivia Hussey, or Turkey Shoot in its original title in Australia. But that's how I like to do it. And with Malcolm McDowell and Pam Grier, I was really upset. Pam Grier, I think she had a great. So if we ever get to make Free Enterprise 2, I mean, it's 10 years later. I don't know if she'd do it, but I would cast her in that part again, if you could get her back. But that's kind of how it goes for me. So thanks for writing in. I have no problem talking about that at all, and it would be fun to make that movie one day. I really would love to do it. Omar94 is here. Omar says, "Hi, Rob. I wanted to write this letter to inform everyone of a movie anniversary. July 13th, 2020, that is today, marks the 30th anniversary of the movie Ghost, which released on July 13th, 1990. It became the biggest hit of 1990, defying expectations, winning Oscars for original screenplay and supporting actress, and even getting nominated for Best Picture. There's, of course, all the famous lines like Patrick Swayze's Ditto and Whoopi Goldberg's You in Danger Girl, and the famous scenes like the shadows turning into dark spirits and the pottery scene with Unchained Melody playing in the back. It's not a movie most people talk about on a regular basis, but I do really like it. I think it's and I think it blends several genres together in a really neat way, combining comedy, mystery, romance, and horror. The cast is great, from Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, and Whoopi Goldberg, who won an Oscar. Another surprise was that this movie was directed by Jerry Zucker, who, before making Ghost, was best known for doing comedies. Thanks, and live long and prosper. You know, it's funny. I was talking to Elizabeth yesterday about Ghost, and I mentioned that Whoopi Goldberg was in it because we were talking about the next generation. Elizabeth was like, wait a minute, Whoopi Goldberg was in Ghost? I was like, yep. Omar also is here again. Hi, Rob. With some movies and TV shows, not all of them, but some of them, I end up thinking the best character is someone other than the main protagonist, even if I like the protagonist. With television, for example, I think the best characters are Barney Fife on The Andy Griffith Show, Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, the Professor on Gilligan's Island, and Jeffrey on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. With movies, that seems to be the case with a lot of Disney movies. I think the best characters are Dopey in Snow White, Sebastian in The Little Mermaid, Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast, Genie in Aladdin, and Mushu in Mulan. This isn't a Disney movie, but it's animated, and as I think Donkey is the best character in the Shrek movies. One example, for a live-action movie, I think Doc Brown is the best character in Back to the Future. Absolutely he is. I'm not sure if you and others are like that when you watch certain movies and TV shows, but that's just the way I see it. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, I mean, you know, I think, look, Back to the Future wouldn't work as well as it works without Michael J. Fox playing Marty McFly. But clearly the standout performance is Doc Brown. And by design, but you need Marty to ground the movie. I mean, people would say, like, look at a movie like Rain Man. I think Dustin Hoffman's performance, everybody who's seen that movie, he walks away with the movie, but you needed Tom Cruise to ground that movie. I mean, same as, speaking of Tom Cruise, one of the things I always admired, I've always liked Tom Cruise as an actor, but one of the things I admired about Tom Cruise is he was never afraid to be in a movie and allow another actor to share the spotlight with him. He was in Color of Money, where I think it's Paul Newman's movie, but Tom Cruise was, you know, he's great in the film, but he was happy to be in a movie with Paul Newman. And that spoke a lot to how Tom Cruise, I think, managed his career. And I think it's great. So I love it. Look, Hans Gruber in Die Hard. I mean, Bruce Willis is great in Die Hard, but Alan Rickman walks away with that movie. And Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. But I think that's okay. You know, it's those secondary characters that make movies sometimes as amazing as they are. And I think that's a great thing. And I think that also speaks well of the filmmakers because, you know, you can be the hero in a movie, but look at Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is the hero, but Han Solo is clearly everyone's favorite character. I love Luke, but Luke was the audience's proxy into the world. And it's the characters we meet there. It's Princess Leia and Han Solo and Chewie and R2 and 3PO and all that. Those supporting characters are what make the film. So I think absolutely that is you're absolutely right. This letter comes from Terry Flynn, our former moderator. Dear Rob, greetings. I've written to you recently about the untapped short stories in science fiction that I believe could become cult and artistic masterpieces to match Predestination and Gattaca. They might even become highly profitable. Arrival was based on a science fiction short story. In this time of lockdown and semi-lockdown, I fell down an internet hole when reading about anthology series and hence Roald Dahl. Tales of the Unexpected, both the book and the movie, the TV show. I think I started out with the amusing use of Una Chaplin, yes, granddaughter of that Chaplin, in the largely silent episode of Inside Number 9, the best anthology series of the modern age, in my opinion. Though it is well known that Ian Fleming and Christopher Lee were British spies in World War II, I never knew that Dahl was too. Roald Dahl even spied on our allies, the USA instructed by Churchill to persuade FDR to enter the war on the Allies' side. His life, his friendly rivalry with Fleming, and his placement deep within the USA establishment seemed to be a perfect biographical movie. I love that idea. Yet again, I find myself discovering aspects of our recent history that could be made into a movie in a relatively cheap manner, thus allowing either cinema or streaming release. Why is Hollywood so short-sighted? Kind regards, Terry. Well, Hollywood is short-sighted for that very reason. I mean, you'd have to look into these stories, and then you'd have to see somebody that understands that there's value there. There's incredible stories to be made. There's so many great stories, but now, unfortunately, Hollywood's mindset is no longer about just making stories. It's all about spectacle and tentpole movies, and I totally get that. I mean, I completely understand where Hollywood is coming from, and it's a bummer that is the reality of the world that we live in now. I mean, it really is. It is quite the bummer. But unfortunately, I would love to see it. Look, I don't understand why there are on these shelves. I have a lot of anthology collections, horror and science fiction short stories and fantasy short stories. I mean, there's so many. I just read that Stephen King's new book of novellas, If It Bleeds. I think all 4 of the stories in If It Bleeds got optioned. And of course, it's Stephen King, so everyone reads it. But there's thousands of short stories out there. You're talking about something that was real, a real historical thing, and that's even got a hook. You know, Roald Dahl and Ian Fleming going at it, having a rivalry during World War II. How cool is that? I mean, that's something I could see a streamer making into a movie, and you could cast it really well. But, you know, Hollywood is a very of-the-moment kind of a place, unfortunately. And I wish that they weren't as short-sighted, unfortunately. But they are. But I think that's a great... I would go see that movie. That's a great idea for a film. I love it. This next letter is from Ian Samuels. Rob and fellow Robservationists. During the 1960s and 70s, it was popular to have movies with pop stars in them. This, I suppose, started with Elvis in the 50s, but this led to many Cliff Richard movies, Joe Brown and the Broovers, Freddie and the Dreamers, and many others appearing in movies. I mean, Mick Jagger in performance. I would like to use 3 examples that are seriously fucking weird. First, Cliff Richard in a 1973 movie called Take Me High, where Cliff stars as merchant banker Tim Matthews, who lives on a canal boat and arrives in the West Midlands city of Birmingham. Birmingham is often referred to as Brum, and the people are called Brummies. This is important as the premise of the film is the merchant banker helping a restaurant in Birmingham, and to help them, he helps them sell their burgers with a merchandising campaign for Brum Burgers. So it's a bit weird, but not as weird as 1965's 3 Hats for Lisa with Joe Brown and his Broovers. Lisa is an American tourist who has a collection of hats and just needs 3 more to complete her collection. A London policeman's helmet, a London guard's bearskin, and a third I can't remember. But the thing is to have it be stolen. Why do they have to be stolen? I have no idea. Perhaps if you took the same cocktail of drugs the writers obviously had taken, you might have some idea. Finally, we find ourselves in 1968 and the Monkees and the acid trip known as Head. Well, I've seen this movie a couple of times, and it's about, I have no idea. Any description of the movie I can find, and all I can find say words like psychedelic, surrealist, and plotless, all of which do not help. I've also seen interviews with the Monkees and a making-of documentary and still have no idea. Between the 60s and 70s, there were many odd films, including Deathbed, a film about a demonically possessed bed that eats people, and many with pop stars in them. I'm sure you and the members of the Post-Geek Singularity can remember many different ones. We'll dive in and have fun with these movies. Well, since you bring it up, some of my favorites are Nicholas Roeg's Bad Timing, a sensual obsession that stars Art Garfunkel and Teresa Russell. I mean, that was crazy. And, of course, Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie. And then, of course, you've got Tommy, and there's a lot of movies with pop stars in them. But, you know, Mick Jagger in performance, in Donald Camill's performance, I did like that. I thought he was actually pretty good. I think Mick Jagger's a pretty good actor. So, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. I wonder why that is. Maybe because Hollywood thought that, you know, there's a built-in audience and they could have that cross-pollination. It didn't usually work very well, unfortunately. But what can you do? Anyway, let's see what you guys are doing over in the chat. Let's see. Bob Koal, I believe, was the first. Nope, Calvin Bose. Calvin Bose says, we went to see Empire Strikes Back on Saturday, and Braxton asks, why did Boba Fett believe Vader about compensation if Han dies when he is clearly breaking agreements left and right, and why does he not think the Empire will screw him over like Lando? That's a good question. I love that Braxton asks these questions. Does he really ask these questions, Calvin? But these are good questions. Well, I mean, I think the answer to that is Boba Fett would probably come after him. And with a bounty hunter of Boba Fett's reputation, I think Darth Vader might realize that I might be a Dark Lord of the Sith, but for a motivated bounty hunter, I wouldn't see him coming. So perhaps he wouldn't break his agreement. But it's a very good question. Bob Kowal sends in a tip and says, finally watched your last Quibi discussion, and I believe Quibi will survive. It will become part of the everyday lexicon. Boy, they sure pulled a Quibi, or don't Quibi this up. Or maybe name your product or company here. Maybe blank is this year's Quibi. I think you're probably right about that. I can't see Quibi. I can't see it surviving. It'll be interesting to see if it in fact does. Willow is here. Willow says, I watched the remake of True Grit with my mom, and I don't understand why Haley Steinfeld is considered a supporting actress. To me, she's clearly the lead of the film, even more so than Jeff Bridges. Which version of True Grit do you like more? Ooh, that's a good question. Look, I really like the Coen Brothers' True Grit, but, I mean, John Wayne saying, fill your hands, you son of a bitch, it's to me, it was it was so iconic, and I grew up with it. So that was something that, True Grit was one of those Westerns I actually had seen. But as far as, like I say, in Hollywood, it ain't show friends, it's show business. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And I'm sure that once that Jeff Bridges had said that he's recreating an iconic role, he was, even though Haley Steinfeld was in the movie probably more, Jeff Bridges signed on as the lead. He was paid as the lead. His contract said he was the lead. And so that's the lead. But I think it's a great remake. I mean, it's a really, really, really good remake, and I did like Jeff Bridges' take. I did. I thought it was good. Did your mom like it? Did you watch it with your mom? Gerald says, hi, Rob. Sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. I signed up for HBO Max only to discover that it doesn't have Femme Fatales or any of the After Dark shows. Come on, man. Actually, all original Cinemax shows such as Banshee, The Nick, and Jet are missing. What gives? That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, maybe HBO Max didn't want to have that. Banshee and The Nick should definitely be there. I don't know Jet, but eventually I'm sure they'll put them on. I don't know if they have the license for Femme Fatales anymore, but it used to play all the time. I mean, Femme Fatales was on every day, and usually there was 2 episodes a day. So, yeah. Regards, Throg sends in a tip and says, what is on the border of stupid? Dumb and idiotic? I don't know. Is that what is on the border of stupid? Throg goes on to say Canada and Mexico. That's funny. I like that. Brandon Valenzuela sends in a $2 super chat and says, change of topic, but will you ever get a 4K feed? Do you mean a 4K feed for this show? I have a hard enough time keeping the stream going. I do not know. I've got great internet here. I have a dedicated hardline internet. And for whatever reason, using Wirecast and trying to get on to, I'm on at 720. Getting on at 1080 is a pain in the ass. And I don't know why. So I would like to get a 4K feed. Nay sends in a super chat and says, just let me know when Holy Motors will be on Elizaviews. I keep forgetting about that. Holy Motors will be on Elizaviews soon. I really like that movie, and I think she will too. That'll be a great discussion. Tonight we're talking about Memento. Christopher Nolan's Memento. Paul in Long Beach. By the way, Rob, we wouldn't even be able to fly to London for Bond. I guess Detective Jim is off the hook. I know. Can you believe it? We were gonna go see No Time to Die in London. That's what I did that for Skyfall. Skyfall opened 2 weeks before it opened in the the UK. So I went by myself actually and met some friends there, and went and saw Skyfall because I wanted to see the 50th anniversary James Bond movie in London. It was fun. That was a really fun trip. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, if some states open up theaters before others, can you see Tango Shalom have a staggered theatrical release? They won't show the big movies if 70% of the theaters are closed, but a positive movie like Tango Shalom could do well in these times. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully I'm going to have news about Tango Shalom soon, but we shall see. Although, frankly, I just don't see Tango Shalom playing theatrically. But you never know. You never know. I thought a streaming service was the perfect place to put it, but I could see that opening. But I wouldn't want, I wouldn't want my mom and her friends to go see Tango Shalom. I wouldn't want to put people at risk because I think Tango Shalom would do well with down in Florida. So, yeah. Jason Whitcomb's here. Hello, Jason. How are you? Hey, Rob, is the Criterion Channel streaming service worth subscribing to? What are your thoughts? Also, I noticed that you don't like Mystery Science Theater 3000 or shows of that type. Didn't like the Mystery Science Theater film because I think This Island Earth is a fine film. Thoughts? Oh, I agree with you First of all, I don't, there's a whole thing, and I blame Mystery Science Theater about sending up movies. And, like cinema crimes, like, what is that? Who does those? Everything Wrong with Whatever movie, fill in the blank, in 20 minutes or something. I hate that. I hate the fact that audiences, to me, there is a fundamental lack of respect in our culture. I talk about this with Elizabeth all the time too. I see the respect eroding away. And the thing is, to have respect for something, you have to move outside yourself and allow, you should respect something on its own terms. People should be respected. I think art should be respected. And I think that nowadays there is I don't understand, but there's a fundamental lack of respect, I think, all the way around. And those ideas, like Everything Wrong with This Movie in 20 minutes, is a byproduct of that. Like, okay, we understand that everyone knows when Sonny goes to beat up Connie's husband in Godfather, that when he hits him, there's a couple of wide shots where he clearly is not connecting. Well, okay, you're watching a movie. You could call that a mistake and whatever. We all know it's there, but it doesn't to me diminish anything in The Godfather. But there are people that will be the first to point it out. They'll be like, see, look at that mistake. And I've always wondered, like, what's the point of that? Like, are you trying to show me something, one, I don't know, even though I know about it? But why are you so eager to, I don't know. And that's the thing about Mystery Science Theater is obviously they pick pretty horrible movies. I mean, I get it. So they're movies that you can easily make fun of. But I grew up watching cheesy movies, and I find more to love about them than to not love about them. And to me, it's like when you do that, you're picking on a developmentally disabled kid. You wouldn't do that. You would never do that. So if you are watching a movie that is clearly came off the short bus, I try and like it for its own term. I try and like a movie on its own terms for that. I try and find some enjoyment there, but I don't dig it. And This Island Earth is a fine film, and I don't know why you would make fun of that movie. I thought that was a strange choice to make that the Mystery Science Theater. I mean, it's a classic science fiction film from the 50s. I mean, maybe it's not as good as Forbidden Planet or Day the Earth Stood Still, but it's certainly part of the canon of important 50s science fiction movies, and certainly its depiction of alien life with the Metaluna mutant and everything, it's important. So to make fun of it is to dismiss it, and I think I don't like that. That's just me. Jason Whitcomb goes on and says, Invaders from Mars is one of the lost films you speak of. I have it on DVD. I can't find it on Blu. Fox seems to have forgotten the film. I mean the original, not the Tobe Hooper one. I love the old sci-fi flick. I saw it on TV a lot as a kid. Well, William Cameron Menzies made Invaders from Mars. I love Invaders from Mars. He designed it. But I love that movie, and I love the end. I mean, it's a nightmare that becomes real. I love Invaders from Mars, and the designs in it, it's great. It's a nightmare. I don't know why you can't get it. That's interesting. I don't own that movie either. Maybe it's one of those movies that I need to get on and go get. Trent sends in a tip and says, Hi, Rob. I've seen Star Wars Episode 9 several times now, but I'm still struggling with the Palpatine and Exegol stuff. It just doesn't make sense. Sure, I love the idea of them both, but it's poorly written and executed. Plus, how Palpatine dies is so lazy. I think all of Rise of Skywalker is one of the most disappointing films ever made. There's nothing in it from Lightspeed skipping. Yeah, let's come out of Lightspeed in the middle of a city. Christ, I am so there's not. The Rise of Skywalker is a truly wretched film. And it is it to me, it's all of J.J. Abrams' obsessions laid bare, and it shows the Emperor has no clothes. There's nothing. I mean, everyone knows. I'm sure J.J. Abrams is a nice person. I think he's a terrible filmmaker. There's not. He hasn't made one film, with maybe the possible exception of Mission Impossible 3, that I found palatable. He's made 5 science fiction movies that I can barely sit through, and I think Star Wars Episode 9, none of it makes any sense at all. And I look at that film and I'm just in awe of its ineptitude. And I honestly, I don't get it. I really don't quite understand it. And it's incredibly disappointing and lazy. And I agree with you. Jason Whitcomb comes back and says, Rob, did you know that the networks had to air a disclaimer before airing West Side Story? Because when the film was shown in theaters, some kids actually fought in and outside theaters. Same with the Blackboard Jungle and later the Warriors. Yeah, oh, I know. You know, you'd think, though, if you see West Side Story, that you'd rather have a dance battle. Like you'd have your dance crew, but they didn't really have dance crews back then. But yes, it's crazy. Yeah, I remember when there were fights with the Warriors, because I really wanted to see the movie. My parents weren't going to let me do it, but I really wanted to see it. Jason Whitcomb sends in a tip and says, yes, Fabian and Frankie Avalon did films. Frankie was even in a British slasher film, Horror House, and he gets stabbed in the schlong by the killer. Sorry for the spoiler. Well, Frankie Avalon, yeah. He was in Greece, right? Beauty school dropout. No graduation day for you. Mr. Midterms and got the flu. Calvin Bowes is here, and he says, yes, Braxton did ask that question, but this one is mine. How did they get the Imperial Walkers on Hoth for a surprise attack? Well, I would assume that they have either transports or, you know, like Sikorsky sky cranes that would bring down. But you know, we've seen Star Destroyers. I mean, apparently now all the rage is putting capital ships in the middle of planetary atmospheres, and we saw in Rogue One that a Star Destroyer can just hover over a city, which makes no sense to me. And ever since I talked about that, ever since the capital ships, the Star Destroyers or the Proto Star Destroyers took off at the end of Attack of the Clones, or was it Attack of the Clones? Yeah. I was like, oh man, I don't understand. What's this obsession with putting capital ships into the gravity wells of planets? I hate it. I really don't like it. It kind of removes the uniqueness in my mind, and I don't like that. I don't like it at all. Willow says, my mom complained that Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon rambled on too much in the movie. Also, what the hell was that bear suit guy? I don't know. I don't know. Well, Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon, I guess they can ramble on. I guess that means she liked it, though. Who knows? I think you should the journey that you and your mom are going on fascinates me. The movies that you guys are picking to watch is fascinating. I like it. I like it a lot. I really wish we could do a show, Willow's Mom, where you know it would be whining about movies, but it would be you and your mom watching movies and then talking about them afterwards. How great would that be? Why don't we do that show? I'd put that show on the Burnettwork. You'd already have all my subscribers. People would love that shit. You talk to your mom about movies, just call it Willow's Mom. Movies with Willow's Mom. Come on, who wouldn't watch that show? I would watch that show. I think it'd be hilarious. Wouldn't everybody want to watch movies with Willow's mom? I mean, that show it'd go through the roof. Through the roof. It'd be great. Brandon Sheehy says, I mean, you could do it yourself, but you would at least have 27,000 subscribers already if we put it on, so that's cool. We should do it. Movies with Willow's mom. Or come up with a better title. Brendan Sheehy sends in a super chat and says, Rob, do you think Hellraiser 2 is an underrated sequel? So much more expansive whilst retaining the surrealistic flavor of the first one. More Cenobites too. I love Hellraiser 2. Love it, love it, love it. I bought Arrow's The Scarlet Box that has Hellraiser 1, 2, and 3. I even like Hellraiser 3. I don't think Hellraiser 3 is nearly as great, but I think Hellraiser 2 is one of the best horror sequels ever made. Dr. Chenard. I like Hellraiser 2 a lot. Hellbound. I think it's really, really cool. So I'm with you on that. Jason Bueno sends in a super chat and says, have you seen Blood Machines on Shudder? Wild as fuck. Well, I supported the Kickstarter for Blood Machines. And I have to tell you, if you guys have not, if you have not seen Turbo Killer, Seth Eicherman and Carpenter Brute's first team up. Carpenter Brute is a French synth musician, and his stuff sounds like John Carpenter. I guess that's why his name's Carpenter Brute. And Seth Eicherman is the name that these two kids basically direct under. And Seth Eicherman and Carpenter Brute teamed up and made something called Turbo Killer. It's a piece of music he did that Carpenter Brute did, and then Seth Eicherman did a music video, and the music video is totally inspired by 70s horror and science fiction of the Italian Persuasion. And if you haven't seen Turbo Killer, it's great. And it's like 3 minutes long, but it's crazy. And if you look, there's also the making of Turbo Killer, which is fascinating how it's just basically done in their garage. And it's really cool. And Blood Machines was their feature-length, well, it's like an hour, feature-length follow-up. And it was Blood Machines is great. And again, it's got a Carpenter Brute score, and it's crazy. It's very much like, to me, it reminds me of a heavy metal story. It's something that you would have read in Heavy Metal Magazine. It's so cool. If you are a science fiction fan, if you like synth music, dark wave, whatever, if you like Tangerine Dream and you like Vangelis and you like Tomita or any of those, anything like that, you would love. And if you like the soundtracks of John Carpenter, you would love this. You'd love Turbo Killer, and you would love. Well, hell, why don't I just go get the link? I can do that. I have the power of the internet. And I'll put it in the live chat. And you've gotta get it. Let's see. There's Turbo Killer, and you'll get it when you see Turbo Killer. You're like, oh yeah, that's where it all came from. Hang on. Okay, here we go. Sorry, as an ad is playing. There is the Turbo Killer link, and if you haven't seen it, it's amazing. Nick Parrish says, "What's up, Rob? Man, I'm glad AMC was able to grab that lifeboat and flare gun right before Gavin Newsom shut down shop again in California. Or else we would have seen endless speculative headlines again saying, oh no, AMC can't open July 30th. They're roadkill." Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Nick. They were, for those of you, I was on the show Friday, and somebody, I don't know if it was you, somebody sent me the news right when I was broadcasting that it was roadkill, and that they got an infusion of cash. So that was really cool to read that, and that was what, Friday? Now we're on Monday, and oops. I don't know what's going to happen with movie theaters. I don't know. But you know what? I know this. We killed ourselves. We killed movie theaters. Americans killed movie theaters. So it's a bummer. Jason Whitcomb sends in a tip and says, Rob, are you familiar with a film called Wicked Wicked? I've heard of this, a slasher film done entirely in split screen. It's headache inducing. I've never seen it. I didn't even know that's what it was called. I would love to see it. I think that would be great to see. But I don't know it. I'll have to look it up. But yeah, it sounds like it could be headache inducing, which is sort of, I guess. But I'd watch it. Like, what is it? Time Code? Isn't that Michael Winterbottom's movie? Stubble McShave says, R.I.P. Kelly Preston. Man, I have to tell you, I have always loved Kelly Preston. I think I fell in love with Kelly Preston. She was in a movie called Secret Admirer with C. Thomas Howell and Lori Loughlin and Fred Ward. It's one of my favorite teen comedies of the 80s, and not many people talk about it. It's not as nearly well known as the John Hughes films, but I love that film. And she's kind of the girl that C. Thomas Howell is in love with when he should really be in love with his best friend, played by Lori Loughlin. But I've loved her since then. I mean, I loved her in Jerry Maguire. I think she was a really talented actress. I didn't know she was sick. For those of you who don't know, Kelly Preston passed away, I think she was 57, 58. Apparently she died of breast cancer. Horrible. I felt horrible for John Travolta. I don't know why. I mean, she's an actress that I've always really liked, and I don't know why it hit me so hard. I couldn't stop thinking about it yesterday when I read about that. It was just, what a bummer. Really, 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 really sad. Very sad. I'm very sad for her and her family. So, yeah, it's a bummer. Well, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? This is going to be a short show today because I've got stuff I got to do before we go on. Whining about movies tonight will be Christopher Nolan's Memento, his mind-bending Memento. So join Elizabeth and I for a bottle of wine and movies, and it'll be fun. We'll do that. Well, then wait a minute. Ross Gecko sends in a chat and says, if you could pick any IP that hasn't been adapted yet to be made into a movie, which would it be, and would you want to direct? Oh, there's so many. There is a movie, though, that I mean, when you say IP, there's a lot of books that I would love to make into movies. And I guess a single book, I wouldn't necessarily call that IP. But I will. There is a series of books. I've talked about it before. Glenn Duncan's The Last Werewolf is now 3 books long. I'd love to do that. I think The Last Werewolf would be would make a fine film. So I would totally want to do something like that. I would love to do the Hyperion Cantos. You know, Martin Scorsese was going to do that. Those books are incredible that Dan Simmons wrote. But those are the things that come to mind. I'd love to, Howard Chaykin's American Flag. I love Howard Chaykin's American Flag. I think it could be done really, really well. Luc Besson's company was going to do it. Now they're not. Yeah, those are some of the things I'd like to do. Yeah, of course I'd like to direct those. I'd also like to do Jonathan Mayberry's his Joe Ledger series. I know people have tried turning that into a series about 10 years ago, but I would love to see that turned into. You could do a whole season. You could take each book and turn it into a season, kind of like Game of Thrones would do. I would love to see that done. I think somebody's actually developing that now, and I would love to do the Michael Slade series. Michael Slade is a pen name now for a writer named Jay Clark, and now his daughter as well. But Michael Slade has been writing for 35 years, has been writing diabolical serial killer fiction that's set in Canada, and it's about the fictitious Special X division of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I know people laugh, but the books are really, really good, and I love them. And they would make great. The first 4 books, especially, Headhunter, Ghoul, Cutthroat, and Ripper. And I mean, come on, with titles like that. And I would probably I'd love to do it as a series. People have been trying, and I can't believe they haven't been able to get that series off the ground. It's so weird to me, but I do love that series of books, and I would love to trying to do that. I think that would be great. So that's kind of what I would really like to see that. 200 Watt Studio says, how do you feel about the first joke in the Lower Decks trailer being a crew member bullying another about his aspirations of being captain? Not Star Trek. Look, as I said yesterday, again, they're taking what I would like to have seen. If you want to have a Star Trek satire or a Star Trek parody or something, I would like to have seen it as if it was really in the Star Trek universe. what they're doing is it's people from outside the Star Trek universe that are bringing humor from anything. I mean, that joke could have been told in any show, and it seemed all of the humor in that was not, as I said yesterday, it was not situational humor. I thought it was very obvious humor. It wasn't smart. Whereas Star Trek, when Star Trek does humor, and Star Trek actually surprisingly has done humor pretty well. I mean, certainly there are clinkers of episodes like Meridian which don't do humor well. But if you look at some of the best episodes of Star Trek that are humorous, there's some great stuff going on. I said in the original series, you basically have 3 episodes that are humor, overtly humorous. You have Shore Leave, Trouble with Tribbles, and Piece of the Action. And that's all situational humor. And even though Shore Leave isn't all funny, but that situational humor is what's interesting. And even Galaxy Quest, when you go to that planet and there's the rock creature, I mean, that's humorous and situational, and yet it's still making fun of alien life forms and all that. I was very surprised that the humor on that Lower Decks thing was it was not. It could have been in any show, and it was disappointing, and also make the characters all look stupid. I don't believe it's not like they're on a starship. I mean, that starship isn't a terrible starship. I mean, I know it's called the Cerritos. Wow, okay, but I felt that I think that the audience that they were going for is not going to appreciate it. And judging, they had to turn off the comments and the votes when they put up the trailer on YouTube because people were not digging it. So, yeah. Throg recommends the 1987 film Spellbinder with Kelly Preston, Tim Daly, horror 80s style with music written by Basil Polidorus. I have seen Spellbinder once and I don't remember it at all. But yeah, that's definitely worth checking out. I would do that for sure. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to jump off this call, jump off our show. I'm bringing an end to Robservations episode number 466. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for supporting the channel. I want to thank you for writing letters. You can send letters to me at the Burnettwork.net website. You can also send me videos. I have another video that I'm going to play from BL Alley. Yeah, so thank you for doing all of those things. Ross Gecko comes back and says it's weird that Kurtzman is doing all Trek when it was his partner no longer who was the actual Trekkie. Yeah, but he's getting the bank, and I agree. I mean, why doesn't he? He's overseeing Star Trek. Once people are in those kinds of positions, I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see about this animated show. It's unfortunate that they just announced a new Star Wars animated series, The Bad Batch. If you look at how they did such a great job with the Clone Wars, I thought. I mean, it might have started a little iffy, but they did a really, really good job, and it certainly stuck the landing that we wind up with something like Lower Decks. Now, I want to hold off on my judgment until I've seen it, but looking at that, I was like, Star Trek deserves a little bit better, than a Rick and Morty or various other things, sort of a subpar version of those things, which is, I mean, it's always about the money. Once you're getting paid, you want to keep that tap on, let it run, make it rain. That's what they're looking for. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, as I keep trying to do, I want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you for being here for episode number 2. Did I say 266? It's 466. Episode 466. And if you like these chats, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification button. I always forget to say that. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank The Richard. I want to thank Jordy Lyons when he's here, and Haynock if he's here too. And also find The Richard over on the Facebook page, the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, or the Whining About Movies Facebook page, and tell him I sent you, and he's always throwing on some kind of watch party, DJing music or music videos and crazy movies, so go find him over there. It's always a party thrown by The Richard. So that's very exciting. So remember, everybody, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I bring episode 466 of Robservations to a close. And I say, as always, have a better day.